Welcome to the Dental Marketing Guys show. Today we have Dr. Christopher Phelps. Dr. Christopher Phelps, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
It is a huge honor to interview you, and let's just delve right into this. I'm interested in learning what's your background as a dentist?
I've been in clinical practice for over 13 years. Graduated from dental school in 2013. Started out in a little old house that I'd renovated to, my original partner I started with had renovated to a dental office. And it was kind of unique in that we had a great situation. We had a true fee-for-service office. So if our patients, we charged them $1,200 for their crown that day, we would file, our patients would pay us $1,200 that day, and then we'd file their insurance, and they would wait on the money over the next couple of weeks. So it was a kind of a unique situation. And over the next few years, I'd say about 7 years, I was able to grow our business to 4 locations from one, and going from 600,000 in revenue to about 6.5 million.
Wow.
So we had quite a rise. And then I did something crazy, and what most people would find insane is that I sold 2 of our best-selling practices with the least amount of debt, so they had the most profit to them. And I took over our 2 highest debt practices that were producing the least amount, and kind of created some challenges for myself because of that. But I did that because I felt like they had more potential for the 2 if I could focus on their capacity instead of growing for growth's sake. And so over the next 3 years, I grew those 2 practices from 1.6 million in combined revenue to just over 6.2 million in combined revenue.
Wow.
So basically being able to do with 2 offices what I'd done with 4 before. I've actually just wrapped up the sale of one of those 2 offices for profit, and now have a plan I'm trying to do 6 million with 1 office.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And, I'm wondering for marketing strategies, obviously you have a lot of specific tips that you can get into throughout the course of the show. Was there a kind of an aha moment, like where you realized, like, oh, what I'm doing is really working?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say it was in those first couple of years in practice because, the dentist I went in with had associates in the past, but none of them seemed to work out. And so I kind of realized in that moment, kind of 2 aha moments in my marketing career, if you will, that why that didn't work was because he didn't have enough patience for his other associates, right? He thought if he would just back down his time and put somebody else in the office, that his patients would go see the new guy. But in reality is they won't do that. They'll just wait, not get their treatment done until their dentist can see them. So these other guys didn't understand how to market themselves and how to get more opportunities in front of them. So my aha moment was when I really saw the power of using my marketing ideas to get myself opportunities. And the benefit was I doubled the business that first year. It went from 600,000 to 1.2 million. And so I realized very quickly, hey, this marketing thing can work and it can work well as a result. The second aha moment came when going back to when I sold those 2 offices for profit and took over my least producing ones. I realized, I was spending $36,000 a month in marketing and only getting 60 new patients a month for my efforts, 30 at one office and 30 at the other office. So I knew I had a huge problem. I knew my marketing wasn't working for what I needed, but I didn't know why. So I set out to create something to give me those answers, to get the data I needed to make smart decisions. And my next aha moment for marketing was getting that. Once I had the data and saw what was going on, it really changed the scope of how I do marketing and how effective it can be.
Excellent. Was there a time in your career before you were a dentist or at some point in your career as a dentist where you started studying marketing?
I didn't really start studying marketing until I got out of dental school. I had all these ideas in my head on how I want to promote myself, and I knew basic advertising tenets, but never had any formal advertising training. And I would say to date, I still haven't had any real formal advertising training. It's been more what they call the school of hard knocks, trial and error, and mistakes made and lessons learned. And luckily, I've been able to recover from those mistakes faster than most would, to stumble upon some things. But I mean, I've heard some great marketers out there like Dan Kennedy and others. And I've taken away, I try to take a little nuggets away from everybody I would hear talk for marketing, on the few times I did listen to somebody.
Excellent. you talk about the school of hard knocks. It sounds like you've got a wealth of experience in not only helping yourself, but helping other dentists. Can you tell us a little bit about the training you provide with respect to increasing case acceptance rates specifically? For instance, I think you have two top tips that I really have appreciated hearing about
Yep.
on how to increase case acceptance rates.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you flash back again to the issues going on in my two practices that were underproducing, I didn't mention this, but we actually had 2 consecutive years of $1 million growth in revenue at each location. And then we had another 500,000 the next year, okay, as we started getting towards our capacity. Well, one of the things, the secrets to that was obviously getting more new patients in the chair. But the second secret was increasing case acceptance, getting more people to say yes to the treatment recommendations we put in front of them. And so how did we do that? Well, that was when I stumbled upon the research and the works of a guy named Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote a book called Influence, the Science and Practice. And in that book and in his trainings, he taught us about 6 key principles of influence. If you understand them, you can set the stage for more people to say yes to whatever you're going to ask them. So that's kind of what I spend a lot of my time doing trainings on. One of that components is how to use these principles to increase case acceptance. And one of the principles we use, even though it's not technically a principle, but it should be, it's called the contrast phenomenon. And so the idea is that we should always start with our biggest and best option first. And the studies
Mm.
show that when we do that, I ask people this question. I say, what takes more energy, going up the stairs or going down the stairs?
Going up the stairs, definitely
Going up
more
the
energy.
stairs, right? And if all things were considered equal and people had a choice, which would you think they rather do? Go up the stairs or go down the stairs?
Go down the stairs for
Go
sure.
down the stairs. And the question is why? Well, because there's a fundamental law in nature that applies to all of us that is what? Things want to take the path of least resistance, right?
Right.
They want to use the
Right.
path that takes less energy. And so when we've been taught treatment plans, many times we've been taught to take people and what I call take them up the price stairs. All right, Mrs. Jones, your option is this for $2,000, this for $4,000, this for $6,000, and this for $8,000. Well,
Right.
the science of persuasion tells us that if we actually just flip that around, started with our biggest and best option, and then went down the price stairs, in contrast, every number sounds better. So not only are you going to sell more of your biggest and best option by starting with that first, you're going to sell more of every other option you present that's under that. And I've had practices where, I can show you a study where it actually increased case acceptance 340 to 540% of their $8,000 highest priced option. Okay.
Wow.
So then the question becomes, so that's my tip number one, start with your biggest and best option first, then take them down the price stairs from there. So if you got an option of a crown or a filling to present, what should you present first?
The crown.
The crown. Then you can talk about the filling after that. Okay. And
Right.
just by doing that, you're going to get more people to go for the crown because it's the best. The second rule is that if price is an issue for somebody, then we have to control what they compare our treatment to. Because the danger becomes, and in dentistry, we have to assume everybody's concerned about price. Okay. Because people think we're expensive, right? So that's just their perception. And now I'm not talking about, we're not diagnosing their pocketbook. We're not misinforming them or not telling them treatment they need because we don't want the fee presented to be too high. Whatever they need, I present it. I don't care how big the fee is. The thing I'm saying is because I know price is an issue, I can't just start talking about what I want to talk about first, right? I can't throw out a number to them first. I can't say, Mrs. Jones, your crown is $1,200. That's what you need. Because what's going to happen is if I don't say anything and just start with $1,200, in their mind, they're instinctively going to start comparing and contrasting that number to something else in their life. And they're going to go, oh crap, my house payments aren't $1,200. My car payments aren't $1,200. I can't afford that. So
Right.
now within 5 seconds, you've got a mental no, I can't afford that. And anything you say thereafter has been shut down. They're not even listening. They may be shaking their head nodding, but ultimately they're not going to leave an appointment because of it. And that's really what a no is when they don't leave with an appointment. So what instead is, that's the danger. If we don't control what they compare it to, they're going to compare it to something that is not going to work out in our advantage. So the idea is we need to anchor them to something else first, then get into what we're going to talk about. So one of the things I like to talk about is I try to picture what are the consequences of if they don't move forward with the treatment I'm recommending today, and flash forward in your mind a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what's going to happen to that tooth? Is it going to get better? Or is it going to get worse?
Worse,
Get
definitely.
worse. How bad is it going to get? If 10 years from now they decide to fix it to get back to where they are today, what is that going to take and how much is that going to cost? So the idea is in this case, hey, Mrs. Jones, right? You see this decay here. You see this thing in the center of the x-ray. That's your nerve. If we don't get to this soon, the decay is going to get to the nerve and it's going to cause an infection. It's going to cause pain. It's going to cause more time off of work. And to fix it then, it's going to take a root canal buildup in a crown. And that's going to cost $3,600 to fix. So that's your anchor, right?
Yeah.
Well, in their mind, they're going to think, crap, I can't afford $3,600. Because again, they're still going to compare whatever number you throw at them to something. But the
Right.
good news is, guess what? We're not there yet. If we can get to it soon, we're only looking at a crown, and that's $1,200. And after your insurance, it's only $800. And we'll take $400 today and $400 next time. And then we immediately go into trying to schedule that appointment. And you see how better that sounds, right?
Yeah, you went from just coming from a dental patient perspective. You went from 3,600 to 400 in one conversation. It kind of feels psychologically. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the principle is kind of like this: you just saved them thousands of dollars by consulting with them.
Exactly. And that's why this is ethical, because in doing this approach, because we're telling the truth. This is really going to happen to your tooth if you don't do this. So why wouldn't you want to do it today if we can save you time, effort, money, energy, pain later, right?
Right.
And too many times we're focused on the question we want to ask them, which is, let's schedule the crown. But what actually matters more is what we say or do first than what we really want to ask them.
That's really an incredible tip, because so many dentists listening and watching this show, I think, are going to benefit from that. Uh, Man, I can tell you, a lot of times dentists and dental patients are on a different wavelength psychologically, and that makes sense. Dentists don't want to be thought of as salespersons.
Mhm.
A lot of them don't even want to be thought of as entrepreneurs. They want to be thought of as clinicians, people who do great work. And you know, that's important though, because if you can't convince someone to take treatment, to accept treatment, you're not going to have any cases to treat, right?
Exactly.
So this, yeah, it's a great thing that you're telling us. I'm wondering, are there maybe, could you list maybe 3 books that have influenced, I'm sure influence is one of them,
Yeah.
that have sort of influenced your marketing philosophy?
Let's see. Books for my marketing philosophy. I can tell you 3 books that have influenced my business philosophy for sure.
Okay.
That first one was, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki's book, all about building passive income streams, so that instead of saving up all this money for a retirement nest egg that's going to be ticking away as time goes on, what can I create that gives me income for life, right? So money's always coming in without me having to do anything. And that was an eye opener for me from a business standpoint, as an entrepreneur standpoint. Definitely influence. Dr. Cialdini's book was huge, because it started putting language and science behind some of the problems I felt were going on in my practice and how I could use these things to approach them. And because it was based in science, for me, that meant that it was tested. That means it's been proven. And more importantly, that means it's reproducible. So if I do those same things, it's going to work just like it does in these studies. And that's what I've been able to put into practice and to prove. The third book I'd say that probably influenced me a lot was a book called Conative Connection. So Conativ. And that was a book by a lady named Kathy Kolbe, Kolbey, or Kolbe. I'm sorry, Kathy Kolbe. And that book was pretty powerful because it's all about teams and how to build the right team structure and how to define the person's natural instincts and abilities. Because what I found, that was another pillar of my success, was once I figured out my team, once I figured out how to hire the right people, once I had to make sure that I had the right person sitting on the right seat on the bus, well, then I could do more with this team and they could produce more together than any other combination of teams I've had in the past, right? So we could really start growing as well. So I would definitely say those are like 3 of the biggest books that influenced me from a business standpoint, for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. I hope the readers or the listeners are able to take advantage of reading those books. I'll put a link to some of the books in Amazon so that
Yeah.
you can go straight there and buy those. You too have a book. Can you tell us a little bit? I guess you're creating an update. So the book's not available just yet at the time of airing, but could you tell us a little bit about that book and when we can expect the updated revised version?
Yeah, I've got the updated digital version ready. So if you like to read it on your iPad or in a digital format, then that is available. And then we're working on getting it back to print because we sold out of the first round. And then I decided, well, before we reprint another batch, let me tweak it slightly. Because one of the things you'll learn about me and Mike Colby, if you ever understand that language, is as a quick start, I'm always changing things, always trying to improve it and tweak it and whatever. And so the book is called Grow Your Practice with Wine and Cheese. And it all kind of came about. It's about, many of you have sat in a lecture before or heard somebody talk about ways that we can offset and protect ourselves from the corporate dental storm that's taken over our industry, right? And if you don't realize that the corporate storm is coming, I call it the tsunami, then you need to wake up and realize that it is. And so you have to be on your marketing game. You have to figure out this and make marketing and getting new patients in the door a science, not a mystery. Okay, because if not, you're not going to be able to compete. And my theory was that we're not going to be able to compete in this insurance market. So if you're in network with all these PPOs, well, as a solo practitioner, you're going to get outcompeted because these corporate groups who are on insurance plans get better reimbursement rates because they have 400 locations and 400 or 800 docs that are in network. So that means if the insurance company pays them more for their claims, they got to pay you less as a result. So now you got to work harder for less money. So my theory was we got to look for other types of patients out there. Let them fight over the piece of the pie where only 35% of the population right now has dental insurance. Well,
Hmm.
who are those other 65%, right? What do they look like? Well, the majority of them are 55 and older baby boomers. Baby boomers are the retirees. They have the cash to spend on their teeth. They value their health and their looks, okay? And they're willing to put the money on it. But there's a couple barriers that are keeping them from coming in your office right now and spending money, right? So a barrier keeps them from coming in the office to start with, and then a barrier that keeps them from spending money in your office. And so what I tried to do was something called grassroots marketing, where I go to these wine and cheese, or I go to these retirement communities, active independent living. So I'm not talking about nursing home care or assisted living care, just communities where active retirees are together. And once a month, I spend an hour of my time doing wine and cheese seminars for them. And I do an educational seminar on the top 5 dental issues affecting the aging population. And I tell them a little bit about here's who we are and here's why we're different than other dental practices. For those of you that have insurance, great, we work with it. For those of you that don't have insurance, which 90% of them do not, let me show you about my dental savings plan. So this is what I was getting back to before. We've
Yeah.
probably said in a lecture and people have told us about how you need to have an in-house discount plan or a savings plan, but nobody recognized or realized how to sell the damn thing. Okay. Well, that's kind of what I figured out. And how you do it is you got to go to these communities in person, give them the gift of your time, the educational seminar, the wine and cheese. That's reciprocity. That's one of the child eating's principles. If they
Right.
like you, again, that's another one of the principles. You're more likely to get them over the hump of getting in the door. Okay. If you have a dental savings plan to offer them, that gets them over the price barrier that's keeping them from coming in your office right now. And so my theory was if I could get them in the door, lower the price on the preventative stuff like their cleanings, exams, and x-rays, then if we did find treatment, they would move forward with it. So over a year, I sold almost 1,000 of these savings plans at $299, and
Wow.
each person spent an additional $1,243 each on top of the $299. Okay, so if
That's
you add
that's
that up,
amazing.
that was over $1,000,004 in revenue for just one of my locations for $135 in wine and cheese, an hour of my time, and 2 of my team members with me once a month.
That's incredible. That's incredible. You know, wow. So, okay, and you're also very big on tracking results. So
Yep.
you're actually the founder of Call Tracker ROI,
Yep.
and that is a really great tool for when you're putting out these numbers. 1,200 or so, hey, man, you're not just making these numbers up, you're tracking them. Can you tell us a little bit about call tracker ROI?
Yeah, again, flashback to, spending 36,000 a month in marketing and get 60 people for my efforts. And I had 7 doctors I needed to feed, right, to get patients in front of. So I had a big problem, you know.
Mm.
So I decided, well, I got to figure out what's going on with my marketing because I don't know if it's working or not, but I got to figure it out. And I tried every call tracking company out there because I felt like the answer was on the telephone. And I felt like it wasn't the ads not bringing in the calls. I felt like it was something else, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was.
Mm.
So when I couldn't find what I was looking for with these other companies, they would kind of give us part of the answer, but it was really what I call the half truth. It really wasn't enough data for us to make smart decisions about what's really working. So I decided to make my own platform and create my own software and stuff. And so when I started digging into my calls and tracking it, and I have live people listen to every call and give us a monthly report. So in 5 minutes, we can look at a snapshot and know everything that's going on with our marketing. Is the ad bringing in enough quantity and quality of new patient calls that are scheduling to justify? Are they spending enough money in the practice to justify the ROI, right, for what we're spending to get them? Or is it the other side of the coin, what I call a lost opportunity? Are we not answering the telephone? Or are we not converting? And in my practice, I didn't answer 220 potential new patient calls from marketing sources a month that I paid to get, right? 220 potential new patient calls. We didn't answer. Went to voicemail, got a busy signal, or the caller hung up. If we did answer the telephone, we only converted 24% of those calls into appointments. So talk about a problem. Now I start to see why I got to spend so much money to get so little people, because we're not answering the phone and we don't convert the ones we talk to.
That's huge. I've I'm about we're going to do an interview with another a different kind of service having to do with answering the phone after hours.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you, voicemail kills conversion. And the fact that you're tracking these results is really, really important. I'm actually interested because I do SEO for dentists,
Mhm.
and we're always looking for a way to measure the ROI. One of the biggest topics that I've been asked about is how do you measure ROI for SEO? And that can be a little trickier than, say, like AdWords or Facebook ads or direct mail or many other forms of advertising. So it's a little bit trickier, but I'm definitely interested in learning more about call tracker ROI because, man, that's so important. Because your approach to marketing is basically, if I understand it correctly, basically do what works, and the moment it doesn't work, test something else, right? So you're constantly adapting, you're constantly trying new things. To
Yeah.
our listeners, you might say, uh, don't have a bias for or against any particular
Exactly.
medium because it worked or didn't work for another dentist. Just figure out what works for your practice, which may be different from another dentist. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, because the truth is, you don't know why it didn't work for them. Because if they didn't answer the phone and they didn't convert the calls, is that the ad's fault? Right?
Not at all. Right.
It's not,
Right.
right? And I guarantee you that's probably why they didn't convert. But again, you don't know what you don't know. Because if you don't have the data, you have no idea what's going on. So you got to track this stuff one way or the other. Um, and again, SEO is a big component to that. That's one of those things I'm a big supporter of. If anything, I don't even track the ROI on SEO because I feel it's too important. Even if it's just PR, if I can't get my website in the presence of people searching for anything, then I have no chance to book anybody. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And even though maybe today's generation, if your market's older, they're not finding you that way, tomorrow's generation sure will. And the one after that, that's the only way they're going to find you. So the worst thing you can do is not be in the game and be so far behind that when the tide turns and that's all they do is find you online, you're left in the dark, right? Trying to play catch up. So I still
Yeah.
feel like no matter what you're spending in marketing, you got to have some money allotted in the budget for SEO kind of stuff. And my philosophy, as you said, is I can't get you one thing that'll get you 100 new patients, but I bet I can find 5 things that'll get you 25 new patients each or 20 new
Mhm.
patients each to get you to 100, right?
That's
The
good.
only way
And
to
you
do
and you know
that is
that
we gotta,
because you're sorry. You
yeah,
know
we
that
track.
because you're tracking the results.
That's it,
Right.
right? So we track, we do small tests, a small little investment. We track it well and see what's working, what's not, and why. If the fish are biting, I call it fishing with multiple fishing poles, right? If the fish are biting, you feed it more. If the fish aren't biting, you pull up that pole, you throw it somewhere else. But eventually, you're going to have 5 or 6 poles biting, not only in external marketing, but do some in internal marketing, do some with referrals, do some in grassroots stuff with these wine and cheese events. And I promise you, you can get to any new patient number you need to get to with the right quality and quantity for your practice.
I'm curious, kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's in line with the calls. Recording calls and having live people listening to the calls. I
Mm-hmm.
actually did not know this. I recently learned from you that there are other companies and they are recording calls, but they're not having human beings listen to the calls in every instance.
Correct.
And that's something that you actually do really differently from the rest of the companies that are call recording. Can you tell us the kind of impact that's had, maybe a side-by-side comparison of a computer listening to a call versus a live operator listening to a
Yeah.
call?
Well, the problem is the computer, this technology to date, and the artificial intelligence and the program that's trying to listen to your call can't pick up on accents. It can't pick up on slang. If there's any kind of background noise going on, it can't tell what's going on. It cannot differentiate the phone voices versus background noise. So what these programs do that you don't see is there's a category they dump your phone call into called unknown, which means the computer couldn't tell what was going on. But guess what? They don't show you that data, right? And sometimes it's over a third of your call volume is unknown. But when you actually get into those calls and listen to them, they're new patient calls. Okay. So I
Yeah.
didn't like it because it's giving me half truth, but it's not the whole truth.
Mm, mm.
I need to know what's
That's,
going on with all my calls, not just some of my calls.
yeah. I have I don't know if you've heard of this, like voice to text is when you speak, but I actually have the reverse on my voicemail. Voicemail takes so much time to listen to. Us younger generation, we just don't do voicemail that much.
Right? Right?
And it converts it into text, right? So I can actually read the voicemail, see who it's from, the number and all that. And I'll tell you, I get the funniest results sometimes, some of the messages, and I know they're not saying this stuff, so I have to listen to the voicemail anyways. So yeah, computers haven't really caught up there yet. And obviously the psychology of the dental patient is something that computers may not catch up to for a long time.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, would you say, here's one objection that I've heard a lot of dental offices feel like the recording calls are intrusive, and they feel like they just don't want that accountability there. They feel like, this is the way we've always done it, which, as you know, may be one of the most dangerous statements in business today, is this is the way we've always done it.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of goes against the grain of everything we're talking about, that you got to adapt, you got to be held accountable, you got to improve, constantly be committed to improvement. But, what would you say for those dentists listening who say, I'd love to do this. This sounds like a great idea. I have no idea what my front desk is doing to turn away new patients or reduce case acceptance rates. But I don't think they're going to like this. Have you dealt with dentists
Oh,
who
yeah.
who are there?
I had this with my own team. How do you think my own team felt when they found out I was recording their phone calls? Right?
Yeah.
They weren't going to like it. People, when you shine the light of accountability on people, certain employees, the ones that aren't necessarily your best employees, fight it tooth and nail and try to do anything they can do to be accountable for their actions. Your better employees and your employees, B employees, don't fight accountability. They embrace it. Okay? They want it, so they want to improve in their job. So the
Mm.
way I presented it is this. I went to my team and I said, ladies, I'm spending $36,000 a month in marketing. We're getting 60 people for our efforts. Who thinks that's a problem? I got them to commit to the idea that this is not good. Who agrees with me that I need to figure out why? And I
And if
got
they didn't think it was a problem, well,
now they know, right? And now they've agreed that it's a problem.
right.
So using Cialdini's consistency principle, I'm locking them into a commitment that they agree that we need to get to the bottom of it, right? So I
Mm.
said, okay, so to figure out the problem, we got to know what's going on the telephone. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start recording all of these new patient phone calls. Okay. Now I know this is going to freak some of you out. The good news is If your husband calls the main line, guess what? It's not recorded. These are only coming from marketing sources and people who called our tracking number. So if your mom calls, your sister calls, your husband calls the main line, we're not recording that. I don't care about those calls. Okay. I'm only trying to get to the heart of the new patient calls because that's what the problem is. And I said, and ultimately, let's say we listen to them and we figure out that the conversions are horrible. And I pick one of them out and I say, Tina, let's say you're 15% conversions on your new patient calls. Whose fault is that? Is that your fault or my fault? And I don't let them answer. I say, it's my fault, right? Because I had no idea what the hurdles you face on the telephone. I've given you zero training. I just said, I threw you at the front desk and said, get them in the door. Like there was some magic wand they could wave to do that. But it's actually very challenging to get people in the door based on some of the questions they're asking us, unless you have the right strategies. So I said, ultimately, it's my fault because I didn't train you. I didn't give you the tools you needed to be successful for your job. But now, once I have the data, I'm going to be able to do that. And as a result, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm just asking for progress. Okay. So if you're 15%, take the data. Let's talk about it, how you can improve. And next month, if you're 20%, awesome. Improvement, progress. The next month, if we're 25, fantastic. All I want to see is that they're trying to adapt, they're trying to change, even over if it takes time. The good news for us that I found is that in every one of our clients, when you get the data, and that's one of the things we do, we give you the transcript on why they didn't schedule the phone call for that new patient call by staff members. So you can see what each of their problems are individually. So I've proven that if you just share that data with them alone and have a civil conversation about it monthly, and they know every month the light of accountability is going to be on them, we're going to talk about it, their numbers usually double. Sometimes they triple their conversions.
Wow.
With doing nothing else but just reviewing their data. Okay. That's the power of when you have that data, what you can do with it.
That's incredible. You know, kind of in the same line of what we were talking about before with testing different types of marketing. Have you, since you're tracking all these results for yourself and other dentists,
Yep.
have you ever been like surprised at like, wow, this is really working? You know, direct mail is really working for this dentist, whereas SEO is really working for this dentist, whereas something else, radio ads are really working for this dentist. I'm willing to bet that you're once in a while you see this happen and you're like, wow, I would have never thought that would work.
Oh yeah. Well, again, that's why I tell people, I don't care what you're doing, right? I'm not going to give you a judgment on it. I just want to prove whether it works or not for you. Okay. And so I usually poo-poo billboards. Like every time I talk in my marketing, I have like a 2-day marketing workshop I do for dentists. And I usually tell them, look, billboards, they're horrible. I mean, they don't work for 90% of the people that we track them for. But guess what? For 10%, they're killing it with billboards. So
Yeah.
again, it's not up to me to decide. Let the data justify the expense. And if it doesn't, pull up stakes and move out. I talked to somebody the other day. That's all they're doing is SEO and online stuff. And guess what? They're getting 60 to 90 new patients a month. I'm not seeing that in a lot of people. I mean, that's like unheard of. It's crazy. The real
Yeah.
question
For one
is,
practice, huh?
yeah, one practice, 2 doctors in there. And the real question is dig into the why for that practice. Why is the billboard working for those guys? Well, they have a very powerful message. Their message is they're an emergency clinic. So if you're driving down the road and you're in pain, you see their billboard, well, guess what? That's your market, right? They're more likely to call you as a result. So they're hitting their niche perfectly is basically the gist. So
Yeah. I love this approach so much better. And the fact that you're tracking the results and trying different things. Do you think diversification is a pretty important thing to implement? I mean, when you
definitely.
talk about 5 different fishing poles, I think of, doing a little bit of everything and then testing it and do what's work. Would you say diversification is a virtue in dental marketing?
Definitely. Because number one, you don't know which things are going to work. Number two, you don't know why it's not working. So if you find like you're doing all this SEO and you're getting a lot of calls, but you're not answering and you're not converting, well, now it's not the SEO's fault. You keep doing it. But now if you capitalize on the lost opportunity, you're going to take the ROI to a whole other level. And, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the biggest issue I have with dentists is when I tell them about missed calls, they always think the same thing. Oh, we're not missing any calls. They always think that. And every time I tell them, look, I'll take the Pepsi challenge with you all day long. I'll run tracking and I'll give you the first couple of months for free if I'm wrong. But we're all missing calls from new patients. Our average office doesn't answer 33 to 55% of their marketing-based telephone calls. These are new patient calls you paid to get. They're not answering. And their conversions overall are about 34% as well nationwide. So we've got a missed call and conversion problem, not necessarily an ad generating leads problem.
Mm, that's really powerful. Yeah, man, I'm interested in learning more. Where can our listeners and viewers learn more about Call Tracker ROI?
Well, it's pretty simple. www.calltrackerroi.com.
And you're also on the forums. I think that's your username, Call
Yeah,
Tracker ROI.
it's my username on Dental Town, and so I'm usually posting under that name. Yeah, so I try to make it simple. Just describe what we do. We track calls, and I want to know the actual ROI, meaning how much money, how many actual patients showed up in the practice from these advertisements, and how much actual money did they spend in our practice, and does that justify what I paid to get them?
And this isn't the first time you've spoke on this. You've actually, weren't you nominated or awarded the best speaker at Practice on Fire last year? And I think you're speaking again.
Yeah, it was kind of an honor, because we had about, I don't know, 12 or 14 speakers, and we all had evaluations and reviews, and I think 75 people out of the 120 that were there turned in their surveys, and I got 4 out of 4. I got a perfect score from everybody, so I outpaced all the other speakers. So one of the organizers, Dr. Michael Ling, said a great quote. He said, "Look, normally you can't get 2 dentists to agree on anything, much less 3. But you have 75 dentists that all agree on the same thing. That Phelps is awesome." I was
Oh
like,
man, it's such an honor to interview you here. I mean, that's really incredible. I wish you luck at Practice on Fire pretty soon. Are there any other speaking arrangements that you have coming up?
yeah, April 8th and 9th here in Charlotte, I'm doing my 2-day persuasion workshop. So if anybody wants to learn the principles of influence, how I use these in my dental practice, and how you can too, to decrease no-shows, get more people to pay today before they leave, or at least pay by their first invoice, increase your referrals. I have a great internal referral system using 5 of the 6 principles of influence that's doubling or tripling referrals in people's offices,
Wow.
and how to increase your case acceptance and take it to a whole other level. If I can get more of your team members there, again, the faster you'll get it implemented and the better it'll be for your practice. So that's April 8th and 9th here in Charlotte.
Wow, that's excellent. I'll tell you, doing SEO is a great lead gen source for many dentists. Although I do an analysis before I work with anyone because it's really, really important to know what you're getting into. A lot of dentists don't even want to touch SEO because they don't know what it is. I help with that. And I'll tell you, one of the best things to compound those efforts for SEO is what you're talking about, referrals.
Mhm.
Because when you get someone through SEO or another advertising method, you're bringing in someone who tends to not know your other patients quite as much. So when you get a referral from a second generation, uh, at someone who's already been in your practice, those people tend to know each other more. And so you tend to kind of cap off. Now you could get more referrals from someone who's already an existing patient. It's certainly possible. And you do have those all stars, and I'm sure you're tracking things like that too, as many dental softwares do.
Mhm.
But I'm really blown away at the idea that SEO and other forms of advertising can actually bring you more referrals per patient, because those, it's like a whole new tree of a whole new vein of people.
Definitely.
And I love it. I love the fact that I'm able to bring someone who would have never heard of your practice but for the SEO.
Yep.
So if we were able to compound that with the kind of training that you're providing, man, think of all the referrals you can get from people who would have never heard of your practice. So I definitely hope they check you out as far as your new print book and the digital version. Can you tell us where we can find that again?
Yeah, it's at www.wineandcheesenewpatients.com. Wine,
Excellent.
cheese, new patients. And you're right. And people ask me, well, I didn't mention this part, but I went from 60 new patients a month to averaging over 300 a month within 3 months. Okay. By decreasing my marketing costs 75% at the same time. Why? Because I tapped into that lost opportunity. We answered the phone more. We converted better. Now we convert like 86% of our calls. Okay. But it was,
86.
yeah, 86 is our average. Okay. So it's phone training works, folks, if you have the data to back it up. I'm just telling you. A lot of people's phone training, they don't have the data. They don't know what happens after their training. So they can't tell you if it really works or it doesn't. Right. But the data itself is powerful. But like you were saying, that all that stuff compounds each other. So, when you get all these new patients from external advertising sources in, and you do this referral system on top of that, everything just blossoms and balloons on top of that. It's amazing.
It's so compounding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
said you can get to any new patient number you want to get to, but you
Right.
can't do it with just one thing.
Can you tell the viewers of a specific case study? I think they're dying to hear about this, how this has worked. Obviously, for you, it's worked amazing. Can you
Mhm.
tell us about another dentist who has greatly benefited from what you're offering? It could be call tracker ROI or the Cialdini influences, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, just from an influence standpoint, I've got several quotes and testimonials on my website from people that have gone through the workshop. And their case acceptance, and I always joke with them. I say, whether I'm talking about influence like this for a small period of time, for 2 hours or 2 full days, I tell them, if you do nothing else but do that, take them down the price stairs that I talked about tonight. If you
Hmm.
start with your biggest and best option, but if price is an issue, you anchor them to something else first, the consequences of not doing your treatment and what that's going to cost them, and then go into what you want to talk about from there. I promise you on Monday, your case acceptance will start skyrocketing in everything that you do. And I got testimonials from people backing that up. I had one guy who heard me do a 2 hour talk, and I said that if you remember nothing else about what I talked about tonight, but this, I promise you, you'll see results. And they flew out to my 2 day workshop because they said, well, Phelps said if I remember nothing else but this, it was going to work. And you know what? Holy cows, it worked. So I want to know more as a result. From the call tracking side, again, I save doctors money all the time because we find problems they didn't even know they had. I call it the gorilla in the room, right? You didn't even know there was a gorilla in the room until we identified it, and now we can strategically make a plan to get out of it, get around it. So this one guy loved billboards, and he was just dead set on doing a billboard. And I said, okay, this thing's $2,500 a month. Are you sure you want to invest this money in that? And he said, yeah. And the other thing I don't like to do is I don't like to do long-term contracts personally until I've tested it, proven that it works for me, and then I'll sign a big old long-term contract to get a better deal on it, right? Because I've already proved that it works. So he was going to get locked into a year-long contract for this thing at $2,500 a month. And I mean, if you think about it, that's 30 grand he was about to invest. And I said, hang on, see if you can get an out. So promise them, say, give me 3 months and let me get out at 3 months. Or if I stay on, I'll sign a contract for 15 more months. So in essence, he was giving them a chance to get an 18-month contract, but he got a 3 month out. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So we tracked it, and I didn't tell him his data. We put tracking numbers on his website, on the billboard. So anybody called related to the billboard, we would capture them. And at the end of the 3 months, I told him, I was like, hey, doc, how do you feel? How do you think it worked? How do you feel like it worked?
Hmm.
Because many times we make our decisions based off emotion, feeling, and the opinion of our front desk, whether that's reality or not. So I said, how'd you feel? And he said, oh, man, people are talking about it. Traffic's always backed out there. I know we got new patients from it. I said, okay. So based off what you're telling me and what you're feeling, you would keep doing it. You want to stay on with this thing then? He's like, yeah, I want to stay on with it. And I said, okay. You ready for the data? He said, yeah. I said, okay, well, you actually got 14 calls over the 3 months. He's like, okay, well, that's almost 5 calls a month. That's not too bad. I said, yeah, but the problem is 12 of those 14 calls were your own patients. And it kind of went something like this. Hey, doc, I'm driving down the road. I see your billboard. You look great, man. All right,
Yeah.
bye. I said, so really,
Ah,
I said, in 3 months, you only got 2 potential new patient calls. And guess how many your team scheduled an appointment for? 0. So here we are at 3 months. You spent $7,500 and you got no new patients from it. Do you really want to spend $30,000 more because you feel like it's going to work? Or would you rather reinvest that money elsewhere in something I have a better chance, I think will have a better chance for you? So obviously he dropped the billboard. We reinvested it the next month in something called a newspaper insert. Same amount, $2,500, dropped a one-time ad, and he got 25 new patients from it.
Wow. This sparks an idea, a question in my mind. All marketing should be tracked, but what percentage of the budget of marketing are our listeners dedicating to their marketing? What percentage goes to tracking the results? This is a great example, a great case study, because the guy felt like the billboard worked. You were
Right.
able to save him $30,000
Yep.
on a subsequent another 3 month, not 3 months, I guess.
Getting out
And
of contract. Yeah.
I mean, wow, that's incredible. So, you know, I always have been interested in, with SEO. There's a lot of it's kind of an enigma until you have someone you can really trust
Mm-hmm.
on the data. With web design, for instance, I'll tell you, I've been working in marketing for years and years. Nobody ever tells the owner of a website that it's haggard, even
Mm-hmm.
if it is.
Right.
And it's kind of like that. I mean, they're like, hey, I'm driving by and I see your billboard, but in that case, it might have not been the design, it might have been the effectiveness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, a lot of times dentists might say to me, they say, well, look, I know it's not the prettiest website in the world, but my patients really like it. Why do they think that? Because you just ask them dead on, like, hey, what do you think of our website? And of course, nobody wants to be a jerk. They say,
Right.
oh, okay, well, it's fine. And they're really thinking in their head, like, well, I've seen better. And so sometimes when you poll your own patients face to face, that's not really the best way to track what works and what doesn't.
That's a lot of subjective information.
Right, right.
Right. And again, it's feeling, it's opinion, it's innuendo, but it's
Yeah.
not data. It's not the truth. But
And if your patients they don't want to get a hole drilled in their jaw too bad, they might just tell you your website looks great no
yeah,
matter what.
whatever you want, Doc. What do you want me to say? It's great. I love it.
Yeah, so man, I love the objectivity, Dr. Christopher Phelps. Man, I love what you're doing for dentistry. You're helping dentists understand what works and what doesn't work. And that's great if a salesperson wants to sell a billboard and make them feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But it's your job to tell these dentists whether it's working or not. And what I really appreciate about that is that you're not biased as far as what to try. Based on your experience, what works and what doesn't work, but you're not like, hey, we only do direct mail or we only do SEO and all that. So I like that the holistic approach is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I give every ad source every chance to work, right? And like I said, the majority of the time, I don't in any market, whatever it is bringing calls in. The problem is we're not answering, we're not converting most of the time. But let's say the other side, let's say the ad doesn't bring the calls in. Let's say the phone's not ringing, right? Is it the ad's fault? Well, really, why isn't the phone ringing? Because we dropped this ad. And it's really two things. Either we don't have the right messages in our advertisement that caught people's attention to our target market, right? So maybe our market's looking at it, but it's the wrong message. Or we have the right message, but our market doesn't look at that stuff in that medium. And the
right.
example I give is when I talk about sedation dentistry, I've done radio ads for 10 plus years. And one of my best sellers and why I do radio ads to this day still is because I advertise sedation. And I get people that drive 57 miles away to come to my practice because we do sedation, oral sedation. And I
Yeah.
asked this guy one time, so he literally drove 57 miles. And I said, dude, why are you here? Seriously. And he said, because you do sedation. And I was like, nobody in your town does sedation? He goes, no, nobody in my town does it. He said, I heard you on the radio. I want to be knocked out. This is what I'm here for. So I went to, and then on the internet and Googled sedation Salisbury, North Carolina, and freaking 8 dentists popped up.
Mm.
Okay. There were 8 other dentists that could have done the same sedation for him that I did. So why did they come to me? Because that message of sedation was the right message, but the market didn't use that medium to find that info. He used
Yeah.
the radio, and a lot of these people do as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
just an example. But when you, that's one of the two things that the ad's not working. Either you got the wrong message for the market looking at it, or it's the right message, but your market doesn't see it at all. So if you can fix those things and hone either one of those in, give the ad another chance, I promise you it's going to work.
Right. Right. New technology, just to kind of wrap up here, because we are coming to the end of our time, but I would say new technology can be a great marketing tool, but
Mm-hmm.
not if your patients are unaware of it.
Right.
So you talk about all the money and really the time that it takes to research, say, like a CEREC machine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a huge investment to even get to the point where you hand money to them, all that money, and yet so many dentists that have a CEREC are not, it's not even on the website, certainly not on the homepage front and center. So you have this huge internal marketing tool that nobody knows about. Like you said, those dentists, they did sedation. They did sedation. They just didn't do a good job of telling this gentleman about it.
Yeah, the community at large, they didn't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, this has been really eye-opening. I hope that the listeners and the viewers are able to take something from this. And I think if there was one thing that they could take away, I think that what you're describing in your speeches, that you say, just remember this one thing. Could you recap that one more time
Yeah.
for us?
So remember, any number you're going to throw at somebody, they're going to compare it to something first. The danger is if we don't control what they compare it to, because whatever they compare it to is not going to work out in our advantage 9 times out of 10. It's too expensive or whatever. So what we have to think about is if we want to do, say, a crown, before we even talk about the crown, what's going to happen to that tooth in 6 months, in a year, 5 years, 10 years? Is it going to get better or worse? If it gets worse, how bad could it get? And if they decide down the road to get it fixed, to get back to where they are today, what is involved with that and how much is that going to cost? And that's the number we anchor them to. The consequences of not moving forward today's treatment. People care more about what they stand to lose than what they stand to gain. It's a simple scarcity fact, another principle. Okay. Then we go into talking about what we really want to talk about. But the good news is you don't have to pay $3,600 for that root canal, because if we can do it today or soon, it's only $1,200. And when people ask how much are things, what they're really asking is how much am I paying out of pocket, not what your fee is. So the next level down is what's the price after insurance. So it's $1,200, but really after your insurance payment, it's only $800. And we'll take 400 today and 400 next time. How does that sound? So if you
Wow.
can anchor them to something else first and then take them down the price stairs with more options and less fees, the more likely they are to leave with something, an appointment for something.
I totally missed that first part about insurance, because I guess I was assuming they were fee for service. But if they're insurance, why would you skip that step? Why would you go
Right.
straight to what their portion is? I totally missed that part. I'm glad you repeated that for the rest of us. Man, I tell you what, let's plug your websites. I think there's more than one. There's the wine and cheese one. There's Call Tracker ROI. Maybe
And then,
there's one more
yeah,
website you'd like to plug before we sign off.
that's my influence website. So that's where you can look at all my testimonials and look at dates for my next workshops for influence. And that's www.guide, Guide, guide them to yes.com.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Phelps. This is great material. I'm glad I had you on, and I'm sure the viewers and the listeners are happy as well. So
Yeah.
thank you
And,
very much. It's been a huge honor.
hey, my pleasure. And I just want to say to those listening, I talk to a lot of dental marketing people out there who I make very nervous because I want to make them accountable for things. And when I find somebody like the dental marketing guy here, who I've seen his post and we have similar philosophy and who gets it and is really actually trying to help us in our businesses, it's my pleasure to actually be here to help out any way I can for you. So I really appreciate what you do and what you're trying to do for the other doctors in our profession. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Our guest of honor, Dr. Phelps, you know where to reach him. If you have any questions for Dr. Phelps or for myself, Please feel free to leave comments below, either on Dental Town, on YouTube, on the podcast, on the blog, wherever you find this video or the podcast. We'd love to follow up with you. And yeah, once again, I'm Justin, the dental marketing guy from dentalmarketingguy.com. We're signing off. Thank you, Dr. Phelps.
Thanks, everyone.